Kratz, Todd Father, and Ken Rosenthal joining us right now. Ken, great to see you. And I didn't think that we still had two trade deadlines, but we did. And I've termed it dump deadline because it's not trades. You're just dumping your players and you're saving money. So I don't know if you like that phrase or if you've heard anything else that stood out to you. Tom Verducci told us yesterday, Major League Yard Sale. That stood out just a little lengthy for me. I need like the alliteration and a little quickness to it. But what did you think of what went down? Because we haven't spoken to you since just suddenly the Angels created really another version of the deadline to put the Ohio teams in a better spot.
First of all, Scott, I called it waiver week. That was my contribution. I kind of like dump deadline better, though. It's more pejorative, as it should be. I wrote about this the other day in terms of whether this is good for the game and just focusing on the Angels because guys go on waivers every year. I'm sure this happened to an extent last year. We just didn't report on it as diligently, and it's because one team didn't dump as feverishly. The Angels did. And my concern is if this happens every year, if it happens every year, with a team taking that kind of approach, baseball's going to have to take a look at this kind of behavior by the clubs because it disrupts a pennant race, it distorts a pennant race. The teams that play the Angels the rest of the way have a decided advantage. It also robs fans of seeing, I wouldn't call it a quality product. The Angels haven't been that, but a further compromised product they're going to be seeing now. That's not a good thing. If you've bought tickets for the Angels in September, guess what? It's going to be a little bit of a rough go, outside of Ohtani, of course. So there are some concerns here. And this was kind of a fun, weird thing. But if it's a fun, weird thing every year, and I would expect that teams might try this because it is within the rules, then baseball has a problem and a problem that needs to at least be examined with regard to how you approach keeping the single trade deadline. Do you move the deadline back? Do you enforce or introduce different rules to guard against this kind of behavior, these pure massive dumps? That's not a good thing for the game.
Do we know if there is a way that they can circumvent this as far as like MLB? Can they say, all right, I know the rule changes on the field, or they propose it and then they can unilaterally do it? Is it the same thing for something like this, or is this cooked into the CBA and we have no chance of it changing for the next 5 years?
It's in the CBA, and certainly no one is going to act, Eric, on behavior in one season, right? It's too small a sample. This was too weird a circumstance to really know whether it's going to become a trend, but I suspect it might. And if it does, then in the next CBA, yes, you'd have to look at it. There are times where you can reopen the CBA, or at least there's that possibility, but they're not going to do it for something like this. I would expect, though, that over the next 4 years that we're going to see baseball take a hard look at this and just see how clubs conduct themselves with this kind of thing. Again, the Angels did nothing wrong in terms of the rules, in terms of the way they should act. In fact, if I were running the Angels, I might have done the same thing, simply because it saved the team money. I don't know how many millions, but it was 5 or 6 million, I believe, in the long run. And it also enabled them to get under the luxury tax threshold, which will give them a higher draft pick if they make Ohtani a qualifying offer and he rejects. It gets to be a difference of 2 rounds. After the second round, I believe, or after the fourth round. This way it'll be after the second. Those are good things for the Angels. Doesn't mean they're good things for the sport. And actually, you can even make the case that it's not so great for the Angels because think about this, guys. If you're a free agent, you sign a 1-year deal there, you might be concerned that this is what they're going to do. They're just going to flip you at some point. Now, there's always that concern for free agents with regard to the trade deadline. But this adds a wrinkle to it that is not necessarily conducive to players being attracted to that organization.
Aren't there clauses in big league for big league teams that they have to put a competitive team on the field? That's kind of like where I'm not sure what the wording is, that the MLBPA is going to file a grievance, but isn't there something where it's like they're specifically not trying to be competitive and they're just shedding money? Which shedding money I understand, but isn't there a level of competitiveness that is in the CBA also? And I'm not sure the vernacular for that.
I'm not sure either, to be perfectly honest. And that is a subjective judgment anyway, right, Eric? Are the Oakland A's in violation of that? I would suggest that they are. Are the Kansas City Royals? There are several teams you can look at and say, hey, this team is not as competitive as it should be. And yet, even with the A's and the Royals, you can point to some good things that are happening. The A's, Reagan, the guy they got from Texas for Chapman's been a real revelation. And with the A's, they have a number of young players who have come up, Zach Geloff being one of them, foremost among them. They're kind of interesting in certain ways. They're not good by any stretch. So you can always make the case that the team's competitive. The Angels can say, we've got Shohei Ohtani. We're a major league product. We're fine. At the same time, from a broader standpoint, and maybe not from a literal CBA standpoint, this is not good for the sport. If it's good for Artie Moreno, yeah, that's great for Artie Moreno. Not a good look for the sport.
Hey, Ken, my question to you is, it's a two-part question, but do you remember the last time this happened before where some teams say, you know what, we're getting rid of a bunch of guys? Because I don't remember it being this significant. And do you see this as a trend moving forward by other teams taking the same route? You know what, forget about it. We're getting rid of these guys so I could save some money or just because.
I can see it being a trend, Todd, and I kind of addressed that earlier with the concern that, yes, it might become a trend, and then baseball would maybe take a hard look at this. As for it happening before, that's a good question. And with the old waiver period, you did see this happen. It happened quite frequently where teams would dump salary. The difference in many of those cases was that they were trades that were made. Now, they might have been kind of bogus trades. You weren't getting much back. But go back to 2012, the Red Sox trading Adrian Gonzalez, Carl Crawford, Josh Beckett. They've got, in that deal, they acquired some players as well. Punto went to the Dodgers, and then James Loney and I believe 4 prospects went back to the Red Sox. That was at least a trade. And yeah, you saw over the years some that really weren't that, some pure waiver claims like these that took place. But with the old waiver period, which I didn't really care for, I thought it was kind of silly with the rules and the confidentiality, the cloak and dagger stuff that was going on. At least you had the possibility to make a deal. In this situation, all you can do is claim the player, and the team can get nothing in return.
This is normally the time of year when we start doing the Ohio chant. So you're going to have to do the Ohio chant with me, however they do that. I know the O and everything. And we're getting ready for college football season. Now, all of a sudden, a team like the Guardians starts dumping players, traded Savali when they were 1 game out, but they reverse course 5 games out, and now they join up with now their odds to win the AL Central have just gone up. What is the maneuvering there, and what is the thought process is there? I mean, the guys they picked up, I think, really improved their team in a weak division.
I agree with that, but in my view, and I'm going to use a word that you guys love and use in clubhouses all the time, this is eyewash. And it's eyewash because they already tore the team down. Granted, they said they were creating opportunities for younger players, and then they went to some older veterans anyway. They tore the team down, or at least made some sell-type trades, and now they're saying, oh, we're going to try again? Remember, their clubhouse was quite upset when they made those trades. Josh Bell, Savali, Ahmed Rosario. They were like, the players, what are we doing here? And the front office kind of had to go in there and say, all right, here's the explanation, etc. They had to calm things down. This, to me, is sort of a payback for that, or a chance to cover yourselves for that. And I don't see it really making much of a difference. Yes, Lucas Giolito might be much better with the Guardians than he has been. They've got a great pitching coach in Carl Willis. Ronaldo Lopez has been a quality reliever. Matt Moore has struggled against lefties this year. It's been weird. But he, too, is a quality reliever. Yeah, they're better. But this is what they needed maybe on August 1st, not September 1st. And it just seems to me that this was the kind of reaction by the front office to the criticism that they received earlier. Now, if they turn it around and win the division, which I don't expect, their playoff odds are something like 6% right now, I'll eat my words. But in my view, the Guardians, all they did was try to cover up what they did before, and they should not maybe have taken that course. Or at least If they had taken that course and wanted to jettison some of those players, Rosario in particular, they have other options in the middle infield. Okay, but maybe enhance the club in other ways, and maybe don't trade Savali. Because if you didn't trade Savali, you wouldn't have needed Giolito.
Hey, Ken, sorry, I a little hiccup there. I want to talk about the article you just wrote about Shohei Ohtani, about, why is he still hitting? It was an impressive article, like always. You do a great job. But what do you think is the main reason? You wrote about 3 different ones. Like, is there one in your mind you think that is specific towards him, like why you really think it is? Because they're all really good reasons. What one do you think specifically why he's still hitting?
Todd, I kind of think it's a combination. And the 3 reasons were, 1, he's chasing some pretty big numbers, 50 home runs. Of course, the American League MVP, which he probably has locked up, but he can seal it even further by continuing to play. Potential 50 home runs and 30 stolen bases, or 25 stolen bases even. If he did 50-25, he'd be the first player to do that. And even a triple crown is somewhat within reach. So that's 1. He's got the ability to do all those things, and by hitting, he's not making his elbow any worse. The other thing is he might not want a second Tommy John surgery, and you couldn't blame him for that. The second Tommy John is riskier. It involves a longer, more delicate recovery. It's a tricky thing. And remember, the first Tommy John he had, it took him really 2 seasons to recover. He came back the second year and pitched 1 2/3 innings and then was down again. So he might be looking at a second Tommy John and thinking, I'd rather not. And then there's the third reason. He wants to be ready for opening day 2024 as a hitter because, of course, he's going into free agency. And if he's ready by opening day 2024, his value, at least in theory, might be that much higher. So is it any one of those things? Probably not. Is it a combination of all 3? I would suggest it is more along those lines. But it's still a very curious situation. And the reason I wrote about it was we all believe, based on what we know, and we don't know much about the extent of his tear, the nature of his tear, but generally a torn UCL leads to Tommy John surgery. It's not a matter of if, it's usually a matter of when. And by delaying, either through rest and rehab, PRP injections, a combination of both, you might simply be delaying the inevitable. So this is something that obviously is captivating the entire sport. Captivating might not be the right word. Interesting the entire sport, because we all want to know what's going on with Ohtani, and no one knows just yet what course he's going to take. But it seems pretty obvious, guys. If he wanted to have Tommy John surgery, he would have had it a week ago. Instead, he keeps playing, and it seems like he's going to keep playing and not decide in mid-September, okay, I'll get it now.
How is the man who has connections everywhere in you still writing articles about the best player in our game, by far, unicorn, whatever you want to say? There's really, he's in a shroud of secrecy. And I'm not saying he's doing anything nefarious. I'm saying, how has he done this? Has anybody else been able to do this also? And is it going to continue with the next team? Like this, is this like a selling point? Hey, we can keep your secrecy. Not that he's doing anything bad, but we can keep you in your private little bubble like you've stayed for the first 6 years of your career.
Eric, interesting question. And players have done this before. There have been players who don't speak to the media. I covered Eddie Murray early in my career. He didn't talk at all. Bonds at times did not talk. I can think of many others over the years. I don't want to be singling those guys out, but that was their course. That was their choice. Ohtani speaks after he starts. Hasn't started a game in a while. I mean, as a starting pitcher. So that's his choice. That's the way he goes about it. And he's playing in a market where he hasn't been really challenged with that decision that he has made. Players are not obligated to speak to the media. But most players do speak to the media because they know the media is a conduit to the fans. And that's part of the way the game works. And it all kind of works hand in hand. It makes these guys more famous, if you want to call it that. Not that he needs it. But to be able to get their stories out there, to explain what they do and all of that. It's just all part of the way professional sports and even entertainment works. That said, when he doesn't speak, And when his agent, Nez Bolello of CAA, doesn't speak, it leads to articles like the one I just wrote asking all these questions because we don't have answers. And maybe Ohtani doesn't have answers either. That's one thing we should consider here. I went back and looked. The first time he had surgery, he was advised to get it on September 5th, 2018. He didn't decide to get it until September 25th, 2018. 20 days passed, and then he had it a few days later on October 1st. So it could be he's still just trying to decide what to do. And let's face it, guys, you know this. The decision to have surgery is not an easy one for a player to make, especially when it's the second surgery. In this case, a second Tommy John, which we all know is more complex than the first. I get all that. At the same time, it's going to be interesting to see going forward if his stance toward the media is accepted by his new team or if his new team asks him to do more. My guess is he'll get to do whatever he wants because he's going to be able to name his price and name his conditions and do whatever he thinks is best for him. And listen, he is a little bit of a different player. He doesn't hang around his locker before the games because he's always preparing. So that's one reason that his availability is more limited. But at the same time, this is the stance he has chosen, and it's a stance most players do not take.
Yeah, we truly can't relate to him. And by we, I mean even current major leaguers. Like nobody can relate to what he is going through, which actually I think also causes the problem of the point that Ken just brought up is who's he turning to? It's not like even doctors can look back and be like, oh, well, let's look at the last Ohtani situation where you've got a dude that's hitting every day and then pitches like this. And we're in this modern era too, where you're throwing hard and everything else. Like I'm sure there's a lot of discussion going on behind the scenes. So in my mind, Ken, you were hustling this morning. You put out 2 articles in The Athletic. I think you put out articles on the 2 most interesting free agent cases coming up this offseason. Ohtani, of course, is an easy number 1. For me, the underrated number 2 is Craig Counsell if he decides not to go back to Milwaukee. And I need Kratz's help here. Kratz, you can ask him because since day 1 of Brew Crew territory, which came out in early April, Kratz has been talking about this on the show and asking people within the organization about Craig Counsell and his contract. And I feel like most people are like, why is he bringing that up? Obviously, if he wants to keep managing, he's just going to be there like any other manager does. But Kratz, why did you have this inclination? Are you the new insider for the Milwaukee Brewers?
I'm not the new insider. I would never ever say that. But it's unheard of on so many levels because he has done so well. And maybe because I really respect the guy, I see how he manages. I think he should have 2 or 3 Manager of the Year awards, which really don't mean anything other than, people recognize it. But my question is, because everyone's going to say, well, whatever he wants to do is what he wants to do. Let's say he becomes a manager free agent. What teams would want him?
Well, let's look at the Mets for starters. If David Stearns, who was the former president of baseball operations for the Brewers, goes to the Mets and becomes president of baseball operations there, certainly people are going to put 2 and 2 together and think maybe Craig Counsell replaces Buck Showalter. Now, Buck Showalter has another year left on his contract, but we've seen stranger things happen, right? Any number of teams, in my opinion, would at least look at their situations and say, do we want to stick with the manager we have under contract, or do we want to hire a guy who, as I wrote, routinely outperforms the preseason projections for the Brewers, routinely outperforms what their record should be according to their run differential. They do this with Milwaukee all the time. Now, there's no way to measure a manager and the quality of a manager. There's so many variables, and the one thing we can't measure, which I believe, and I think you guys probably believe too, is the most important quality, the communication within the clubhouse, the ability to hold the team together. Can't measure that. At the same time, his reputation within the game is such that people understand what he does. This team is never a top half payroll team. They're usually a bottom third payroll team. And yet they keep winning this NL Central or stay close to doing that. So, yes, if he gets out there as a free agent, teams are going to have to look at their situations and say, maybe we want Craig Counsell. Now, where he'd be willing to go, what he would be willing to do, no one knows. He has deep roots in Milwaukee. But if Milwaukee is not going to meet his desires, whether it's contractually or with the way the team is run, whatever it might be, and maybe there's a combination of all things that he's thinking about, then he, like any free agent, is at least going to look around. And at this point, with a month left to the season, when a player is in this position, we always say, well, he might as well test the market. Craig Counsell might as well test the market.
Have we ever seen a situation like this where a manager's done so well? Yeah? Because normally it's like managers have that, oh, he's done so well. They get that, they add a year on. And there's always that year on. This whole year, he's never had the year on. And everybody's just said, whatever, it's no big deal. He'll just come back. Do you feel like the Brewers are kind of taking him for granted? Or do you think that the communication has been had throughout the year?
There's been communication. There's no question about that. And I would not say the Brewers are taking him for granted. Now, I don't know the nature of the conversations that have taken place, what exactly was said, what exactly might have been offered. But there have been situations like this before. If I recall, Dave Roberts might have gone into a year as a lame duck. Now, maybe they got it done, maybe they didn't. The Yankees have taken Brian Cashman to the end at times. I believe they took Torrey to the end at times. Aaron Boone, Joe Girardi as well. Certain teams have that kind of philosophy. I remember getting into a conversation with Dodgers president Stan Kasten one day, and he was yelling at me for calling a manager a lame duck. And like, you guys don't dictate what we do. Is that? Well, yeah, if he goes into the year without a contract for beyond that year, he's a lame duck. Counsell's a little bit different, obviously, because he has such stature, as did Dave Roberts for that matter. But yeah, it's a unique situation, at least for Milwaukee with Counsell. It's not unique in the game. There have been guys who have gone to the end without a deal and then either had to work it out at the end or go somewhere else or simply get dismissed.
Talking about management, I want to shift over to the Yankees a little bit. You know, there's been some pressures over there. Been talking about them a lot. People are saying that some things are unprecedented. Things will never happen. There won't be any change. Do you feel a change coming in for the Yankees? Do you think Counsell might be a good spot there? I mean, I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts about what could happen and what will happen after this year is over with for the Yankees management-wise.
The consensus is that no change is going to be made with Brian Cashman and that no change will be made with Aaron Boone unless Hal Steinbrenner ordered a change. And we've seen Hal Steinbrenner be very loyal to both Cashman and Boone throughout their tenures. And Cashman, he's had 25 straight winning seasons. This could be their first losing season, maybe not. It seems they're going to give him a mulligan, even though I know fans are quite upset with the way the team has trended the last few years, and justifiably so. Boone is a little bit of a different story. In my opinion, Boone cannot be held responsible for what has happened here. It is not his fault. This is a roster construction issue, which goes back to Cashman. At the same time, we'll see how much Hal Steinbrenner is reactive to the unrest in his fan base. Their fans are not happy with the team. They want to see change. And it's one thing if you change a farm director or a scouting director or maybe even uproot the analytics department. There's been some talk of that. Maybe they do some of those things, and that's one thing. But is it enough to satisfy the fans? I don't know. And really, the only way things will change in that regard, as far as sending a message to Hal Steinbrenner, is if fans stop going to games. And I don't expect that's going to happen. Fans like going to see the Yankees play, Aaron Judge, the whole deal. But we all know, Todd, I'm sure you know people, you have friends who get in your ear about the Yankees and are just exasperated with them. Hal Steinbrenner earlier this year had kind of a tone-deaf remark when he said, I don't know why people are so upset. Well, people are even more upset now, and it's going to be really interesting to see how he reacts, if he reacts at all in a big way. They might simply do some things around the edges, such as change their analytics, maybe make some other moves, rather than make a big move with either Cashman or Boone.
And we'll get to the comments later, too, from Hal about maybe the outside counsel to evaluate the analytics, which I have many thoughts there. Super weird. But
I'm sure you do.
Ken, thank you very much. Yes. We will get after it in a little bit. Enjoy your game this weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.